Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. The Biden administration wants to curb carbon emissions. The latest effort, boosting electric and hybrid cars. Today, the president signed an executive order with a lofty goal to reach by 2030. Vaccine efficacy appears to wane amid new variants. In Israel, a hospital director says 85 to 90% of hospitalized CCP virus patients are fully vaccinated. And Dr. Fauci says booster shots will be implemented as quickly as possible for vulnerable Americans. With vaccine mandates right around the corner for New York, some areas are only about 50% vaccinated. We went to Brooklyn to find out why so many people are still hesitant to get the shot. The Texas Attorney General urging local governments to join the $26 billion opioid settlement. A recovery center in Houston is happy to receive the funds, but some districts say the deal is a sellout and wouldn't provide enough money to offset the addiction crisis. An Illinois officer who accidentally shot a teenager is in the news again. The DA's backing off, but the teen's family isn't. The Biden administration wants to see 50% of U.S. annual auto sales to be electric vehicles. Today, the president signed an executive order to move automakers in that direction. NTD's Steve Lance has more from Washington.
Today, President Biden signed an executive order in an attempt to curb carbon emissions. The executive order aims to have half of all vehicles sold in the United States to become either fully electric or hybrid by the year 2030.
You know, that's why today I'm signing an executive order setting out a target of 50% of all passenger vehicles sold by 2030 will be electric and set in motion an all-out effort.
Now, the caveat here is that for the target of 50% of all vehicles sold annually by 2030 to be electric, it also does include hybrid vehicles. In 2020, all fully electric vehicles sold in the United States made up of roughly 2% of all vehicles sold in the country, with the lion's share of those being sold by one manufacturer. Now, one of the biggest challenges the electric vehicle market has faced and will continue to be a challenge for them is the infrastructure for charging stations. Some of the big American car manufacturers like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler released a joint statement saying that they were on board with the idea, however, that in order for them to sell more electric vehicles, they would likely need to see more government investment in charging stations and other infrastructure. Just before signing the executive order, President Biden suggested that the current infrastructure package that is currently being negotiated in Congress will be a key part in assuring that these targets will be met. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Steve Lance, NTD News.
Today, Dr. Anthony Fauci discussed a COVID booster shot for vulnerable Americans, saying it will be implemented as quickly as possible. And in Israel, a hospital director says vaccine efficacy is waning and that 85 to 90% of hospitalized COVID patients are fully vaccinated. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
Immunocompromised
White House Chief Medical Advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci says authorizing a third COVID vaccine or booster shot for those with weakened immune systems is a very high priority. Because, he said, data shows that in general, people with weak immune systems do not produce an adequate immune response after receiving 2 doses of a COVID vaccine.
So in this regard, it is extremely important for us to move to get those individuals their boosters. And we are now working on that and will make that be implemented as quickly as possible because for us and for the individuals involved, it is a very high priority.
Israel has already launched a Pfizer booster shot campaign for all citizens over the age of 60. Some other countries say they'll start offering booster shots next month. Moderna executives said Tuesday they anticipate booster shots will be necessary this fall due to the Delta variant. Pfizer also said needing a third dose is likely, citing Israeli data that shows vaccine efficacy declines 6 months post-vaccination. Dr. Kobi Haviv, the director of the Herzog Hospital in Jerusalem, told Channel 13 TV News Tuesday that the effectiveness of the vaccine is fading and said the majority of hospitalized COVID patients are fully vaccinated.
Exactly. Naturally occurring. Old people, most of them are vaccinated. Most of the population is vaccinated. And 85 to 90% of the hospitalization here are fully vaccinated people. Yes, unfortunately, the vaccine, as they say, its effectiveness is waning.
Dr. Robert Ballone, bioethicist and inventor of mRNA vaccine technology, said of the interview, "If this holds true and is verified, this is looking more and more like antibody-dependent enhancement, or ADE. ADE occurs when the virus antibodies generated can't prevent an infection. Instead, they act as a Trojan horse, allowing the virus to get into cells and worsen the disease." In light of recent data about vaccine efficacy against the Delta variant, a number of people are questioning why then are vaccines in many cases being mandated. Health experts like Martin Kulldorff, epidemiologist and professor at Harvard Medical School, advocate natural immunity as a path forward for the young and healthy. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
And today, the White House confirmed it's considering requiring foreign visitors to the U.S. to show proof of vaccination against the virus. And New York City's vaccine mandate will take effect in around 2 weeks. While it aims to keep New Yorkers healthy, it may also deliver a blow to small business owners. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
Bars, gyms, and more. If you want to enjoy the nice things the city has to offer, you'll have to get vaccinated. That's what the mayor said. Now, of course, many Americans have been vaccinated already, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they support such a strict mandate. In fact, most people are not in favor of a vaccine passport. According to a study by Harvard and other universities, less than 30% of people are in favor of a vaccine passport. Small business owners at a rally against the mandate say it would be devastating. And not only because of the unvaccinated guests they might lose.
Because you have two things you have to look at. You have the people that are going to be unable to enter the restaurant or bar that are not vaccinated. You also have the vaccinated people that don't support the mandates, that will not want to support their local business anymore because of the mandates.
Some say imposing such a mandate on businesses divides the community to an extreme degree.
Total, absolute destruction. And this is modern day segregation. Because when you say to a restaurant owner, you have to sit outside if you're not vaccinated, and only those that are vaccinated are allowed indoors.
Mayoral candidate Curtis Sliwa says the new mandate isn't in line with existing laws.
We've been told that if you want to vote, the most sacred privilege we have as Americans, you should not have to show ID. And yet, you're going to have to show ID to go into a bar and a restaurant.
Yeah, that's right.
Mayor Bill de Blasio recently said we already vaccinated enough residents to reach herd immunity. So Sliwa says the mandate comes at a surprising time. While the number of new cases is going up, as you can see here, it is still nowhere near the peak half a year ago. What's even more surprising is the number of hospitalizations. At one point, it was at around 1,700 per day. Now, we are at 50 per day. And lastly, the number of people dying due to COVID in New York City peaked at an average of 760 per day last year. We are currently hovering at around 5 per day in a city of 9 million. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
And with a vaccine mandate for indoor dining coming soon to New York, about half of Brooklyn and Bronx residents are still unvaccinated. NTD's Jason Perry went to Brooklyn to see why they're hesitant to get vaccinated.
According to statistics on the New York City Health website, only 35% of blacks have received at least one dose of the vaccine, as opposed to 50% of whites and Hispanics and 75% of Asians and Native Americans. We asked some Brooklynites if they think the new vaccine mandates will cause more people to be vaccinated.
I think that will make more people vaccinated.
I think it would. Matter of fact, I walk around with my card. I just left 42nd Street, and I walk around with my card to show that I'm good.
It might encourage them to get vaccinated. It's still not going to encourage me to get vaccinated. I'm still going to believe that what's going to be is going to be.
Others had varying reasons why they were hesitant to get the vaccine.
They did say that once you get the shot, I guess you'll get sick or something. That's probably what they scared of, because that's what I was scared of, but I just got over it.
Brooklyn resident Ricky said his 65-year-old brother-in-law had never been sick a day in his life until he got the vaccine.
Good man. He took the vaccine like he's supposed to, and he got sick, and he made my sister and my niece and my great-niece sick. They went to the hospital, they recovered, and he came out and he went back, and the vaccine killed him.
Ricky said his brother-in-law was on a ventilator for about a week before he died in March after getting the vaccine. He advised everyone to consult a doctor before getting vaccinated. One Brooklyn resident gave historical reasons why blacks may be hesitant to trust the vaccine.
Things like the Tuskegee program, where people was experimented on, black people was experimented on with syphilis, actually injected syphilis in them and wanted to watch the duration of how the effects of syphilis would affect them. And, as evil as that is, they'll forever be apprehensive to trusting, and that's understandable.
The Tuskegee experiment was a study performed by the CDC and the United States Public Health Service in which blacks were injected with syphilis without their knowledge. The purpose of the study was to observe the natural history of untreated syphilis, a sexually transmitted disease. The experiment began in 1932 and lasted until inside information about the study was leaked to the press in 1972. Beginning on the week of August 16th, New York City will require proof of vaccination for all customers and workers for indoor dining, gyms, and indoor entertainment such as movie theaters. Enforcement of the policies are scheduled to begin on the week of September 13th. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
We've been covering a lot about vaccine mandates across the country, but have you heard of anti-vaccine mandates? A taxi company in Missouri is rejecting customers who are either vaccinated or are wearing masks.
Charlie Bullington has been running Yo Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri for 16 years. And he recently made an unusual announcement to his passengers. Here's what he told local outlet KMOV4 on Wednesday.
We don't allow any type of masks in our vehicles. The second one, we're very against the vaccines, and we do not wish to have people in our vehicle that did the vaccines.
Before picking up passengers, Bullington says he verifies that they are not vaccinated and won't be wearing masks. He says many people have called him, voicing support for his policy. But still, around 30% of riders opt not to use his company because of this rule. Bullington points to the relatively low vaccination rate in his state and says he's very proud of the people of Missouri for standing up against the vaccine. According to the Missouri Health Department, around 49% of the total population have gotten their first shot and 42% are fully vaccinated. Those rates are much lower than the nation as a whole, where 58% have gotten their first shot and 50% are fully vaccinated as of Thursday, August 5th.
The president of the country's largest federation of unions, Richard Trumka, died today at the age of 72. His cause of death is not disclosed. Trumka has headed the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organization, or AFL-CIO, since 2009. The federation represents 56 labor unions and over 12 million workers. President Biden called Trumka a close friend after hearing the news. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called Trumka an unsurpassed titan of labor. And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer addressed his passing on the Senate floor. He said, "I wanted to inform my colleagues that we have just lost a giant and we need him so." Under Trumka, the AFL-CIO has only endorsed Democratic presidential candidates. And Illinois officials will not be criminally charging a police officer for accidentally shooting a teenager. They found that the officer's actions were justified. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on that.
It was an awful accident. In 2019, teenager Rylan Wilder was caught in Des Plaines police officer Jimmy Armstrong's line of fire. He was shot once in the arm. Fortunately, it wasn't fatal. The officer entered this music studio in pursuit of Christopher Willis, who ran into the building after robbing a bank, hijacking a car, and shooting an officer in the head. Willis was shot multiple times and died later that night. Cook County State Attorney Kim Fox refused to charge Armstrong, saying there isn't enough evidence for criminal charges. Their report says the officer acted reasonably in using deadly force against the robber. It went on to say there is no evidence to suggest that Officer Armstrong intended to shoot the teenager. But a lawyer for the Wilder family told a local Chicago station they're now suing the police department. Their lawyer called the shooting reckless, implying that Armstrong could have used a handgun instead of the AR-15, which dealt a lot of damage to Wilder's arm. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Another van packed with suspected illegal immigrants has crashed in Texas. Tragically, there were a lot of injuries and about a third of the passengers died. Just a warning, some viewers may find the following footage disturbing due to its graphic nature. The overloaded van crashed in South Texas Wednesday, about an hour north of border town McAllen. 20 people were injured and 10 died when it tipped over on a curve. A total of 30 people were crammed inside the 16-seater. Reporters say the Texas Department of Public Safety won't release their identities until their relatives are notified. The Brooks County Sheriff told reporters that the passengers were suspected illegal immigrants. Sadly, it's not the first time something like this has happened. Smugglers jammed an SUV with 25 immigrants earlier this year. Reports say they crashed in California and 13 people died. And as the number of illegal border crossings surges to the highest level in 2 decades, smugglers are making a huge profit. A senior Homeland Security official recently told Congress that cartels and others involved in related criminal activities can earn up to $6 billion per year.
Cartels and other smugglers are making huge profits on illegal border crossings. John Condon, the acting assistant director of ICE's Homeland Security Investigations, told Congress last week U.S.-bound human smuggling and related criminal activities are estimated by the Homeland Security Operational Analysis Center to produce revenues of between $2 billion to $6 billion per year. Smuggling humans is less risky than smuggling drugs, as border crossers need to pay a large amount of money up front. According to the Washington Times data, people from Central American countries pay anywhere between $4,500 to $30,000 to enter the U.S., with the typical rate between $9,000 and $10,000. Mexicans are paying between $3,600 and $18,000, with a typical rate of $8,000 to $9,000. That doesn't include other costs along the way or a final release fee that smugglers charge, which can add on thousands of dollars. Analysts estimate that at least 3/4 of illegal immigrants opt to pay a smuggling organization for the journey. Experts say 2021 will be a record-breaking year for the smugglers.
We hear from the Texas Attorney General on the $26 billion settlement that states made with drug companies. He encourages cities and counties to join the deal, but district attorneys in Pennsylvania are suing over the agreement, saying it's not enough. Here's NTD's Kevin Hogan with more.
The time is now for action, and we must maximize our recovery.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says the settlement with drug companies is a good deal for the state. He said it would deliver money immediately to the state and its communities, and he's calling on cities and counties to join the deal.
If cities and counties decide not to join this deal, Texas will receive no real money now. The cities and counties with trial dates have no guarantees of a trial, and they have no guarantees of any money. And one thing they are guaranteed is a long, drawn-out process.
Drug companies have agreed to a $26 billion settlement with states to resolve opioid lawsuits. The deal was brought about by a bipartisan coalition of state attorneys general. The money will be spent on strategies designed to reduce addiction and overdose deaths in the states. Experts will first have to approve the measures. It would bring a maximum of $1.5 billion to Texas. A director at a sobriety center in Houston, Suzanne Jarvis, says the drug industry is rapidly changing and that there are new forms of drugs coming out. She says her center has treated about 35,000 people, and sadly 10% of them are treated on a regular basis. She says the overdose age range is from 14 to 91 years old and recounts a firsthand experience of the horrors of addiction.
And when I saw a 91-year-old female overdosing in her home, I was like, what is going on here?
And there's a significant number of senior citizens that are overdosing in their homes. And so what's so important is for us to reframe how we see people with substance use issues.
Jarvis says she is grateful for the settlement money that's coming in, but the settlement hasn't been well received everywhere. For example, DAs in Pennsylvania are suing the state's attorney general over the deal, with one DA calling it a sellout and saying the $5 to $8 million a year it would bring Philadelphia wouldn't offset the high amount of overdoses there. States have about 2 weeks to decide to join the deal, and local governments have about 130 days to join. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Hong Kongers around the world are hesitant to return to their hometown due to Beijing's crackdowns. But there's some good news for those who are already in the U.S. They can stay longer. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
President Biden on Thursday offered temporary safe haven to Hong Kong residents in the U.S. This allows thousands of people to extend their stay for up to 1.5 years. In a memo, Biden said over the last year, the People's Republic of China has continued its assault on Hong Kong's autonomy, undermining its remaining democratic processes and institutions, imposing limits on academic freedom, and cracking down on freedom of the press. Biden added, offering safe haven for Hong Kong residents who have been deprived of their guaranteed freedoms in Hong Kong furthers the United States' interests in the region. The United States will not waver in our support of the people in Hong Kong. A senior administration official pointed out the vast majority of Hong Kong residents currently in the U.S. are eligible for the program. Hong Kong is a former British colony and returned to Beijing's control in 1997. Back then, Beijing promised not to change the city's economic and political systems for 50 years, until 2047.
Coming up, California's recall election is about a month and a half away. Some hopeful candidates participated in a debate on Wednesday night. They shared their ideas on what they would do for Californians as governor. And the large California fire continues to grow, covering 50,000 acres overnight. It even burned through a small town. That and more here on NTD News. California's recall election is around the corner, and candidates are eager to win the governor's seat. NTD spoke to some candidates after yesterday's live debate to get their thoughts on what they would do for Californians. Here's NTD's John Fredericks with more.
As California's governor recall election draws closer, 4 hopeful candidates participated in the debate at the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda. Hosted by Fox News, the recall debate allowed candidates to share what changes they would bring to California.
Well, the first thing I do is I'd end the state of emergency. It is an absurdity that this is still in effect here in California. Even Andrew Cuomo in New York has terminated the state of emergency in that state. So California is clinging to this pandemic mentality, and Gavin Newsom is clinging to extraordinary emergency powers when there is absolutely no reason to do so, and it's doing terrible damage to our state.
During the debate, candidates answered questions addressing the pandemic, critical race theory, crime, law enforcement, housing, wildfires, and much more.
I'm going to fire the guys that are standing in the way of water development, and I'm going to fire the guys who are trying to release prisoners from prison by changing the rules under which they get good credit. I'm going to change the people who are on the State Board of Education that I have the right to appoint, and we're going to give parents school choice.
Others spoke about homelessness and house prices.
Well, the first issue that needs to be addressed is housing. And why? Because housing drives up the cost of living. It's why businesses are leaving the state. It's a major factor in homelessness. And it's one of the easiest to attack because government is one of the reasons, the main reason why housing is so expensive in the state.
During the debate, one issue candidates unanimously agreed on was that California needs protection from foreign influence and information theft, specifically from the Chinese Communist Party. The candidates also said they would undo and revise Governor Gavin Newsom's policy on crime, homelessness, and sanctuary cities.
As September 14th voting day gets closer, candidates will continue to speak out on why they should be California's next governor. This is John Fredericks, NTD News, Yorba Linda.
A huge California fire recently scorched through a small town. It continues to grow and is on track to become the 6th largest fire in the state's history. NTD's David Lamb brings us more.
This land was recently burned due to a small fire in the Bay Area. But up in the more northern regions of California, the Dixie fire has been active for 22 days, and residents had to evacuate 3 weeks after the fire started. According to the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CAL FIRE, the Dixie fire grew from 270,000 acres to over 320,000 overnight. It is 35% contained. The fire destroyed the downtown area of Greenville. The town has a population of about 800 people in Plumas County. At the same time, the river fire tore through Placer and Nevada counties. CAL FIRE said it burned 1,000 acres within 2 hours. The enormous smoke plume could be clearly seen from 70 miles away.
So we're all evacuating. Everyone's driving home as fast as they can to get their bag and split.
At least 2,400 people had evacuated their homes in Placer County, and another 4,200 were under evacuation orders in Nevada County, authorities said at a news conference. According to CAL FIRE, the Dixie fire destroyed 45 structures and left 5 damaged. Evacuation centers and an animal shelter were provided for evacuees. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
After about 16 months of being out of service, San Francisco's iconic cable cars have resumed service again this week. Visitors can be seen lining up to ride them, a sight that the city hasn't seen since before the pandemic. NTD's Jason Blair has more.
A ride on the cable cars is one of the most popular attractions for visitors to San Francisco. However, when the lockdowns due to the pandemic began in March of 2020, the City by the Bay's iconic cable cars remained parked and out of service. Before suspending service, the cable cars were transporting about 17,000 people a day. This week, they started operating again and are currently free to ride during the month of August. Some San Francisco residents think opening them up again will help encourage tourism and boost the economy.
I mean, San Francisco is opening. I mean, a lot of shops are open, the stores are open, so the cable cars will attract more business.
I've seen the line stretch out around the block a couple times, you know. People flying from Europe, Asia, everywhere, you know. Yeah, man, I've been in the house all year, man. I'm excited to get out of the house, you know. I want to go out, hang out with my friends. I want to go watch a movie or something.
The Transportation Board plans to continue increasing operations over the coming months. The first cable car running is the popular Hyde Line. Operating hours are from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Jason Blair, NTD News, San Francisco.
Coming up, the U.S. trade deficit jumped to a record high in June. What's behind it? And Beijing is continuing its regulatory crackdowns on major Chinese firms. Its latest move wiped out $1 trillion in Chinese equities. Find out more here on NTD News.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here with a new message about your Medicare benefits. You may be entitled to transportation, meals, and expanded coverage for dental work that includes extractions, fillings, and dentures, all at no additional cost. Plus, depending on your zip code, you may be entitled to the Medicare benefit that adds money to your Social Security check every single month. Call and get everything you deserve. Call now, it's free.
I'm on a fixed income, so I called to get money added to my Social Security check. They helped me so much.
I called to save money on copays, get prescriptions, transportation, and my dental work covered. I couldn't believe I was spending money I don't have to spend.
Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline, and you can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-764-1930. That's 1-800-764-1930 now.
Hey Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Can birds draw pictures?
I don't have an answer for that.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Fewer Americans filed new jobless claims last week as the U.S. job market continues to recover. Initial claims for state unemployment benefits fell to 385,000. The number of people continuing to receive benefits dropped to the lowest level since the pandemic began. One economist says from this jobless claims number, together with other data like flights and restaurant bookings, it appears for now the economy is still well on the path of recovery. But others say stimulus from the government and central bank are artificially propping things up. There are also worries around new variants of the virus, and despite today's positive job news, the job market recovery still has a long way to go. The U.S. is still 6.8 million jobs short of where it was in February 2020. The Labor Department will release its July jobs report tomorrow. The U.S. trade deficit in goods and services rose 6.7% in June, hitting a record high of almost $76 billion. We've never imported more products in a single month, over $280 billion worth, up over 2% since May. By the laws of economics, when your country runs a trade deficit, it's becoming less wealthy. And so far this year, the deficit is over 46% higher than the same period last year. The goods deficit with China, the largest the United States runs with any country, rose 5.8% in June. Some analysts expect the trade deficit to narrow in coming months. They think the U.S. will export more to countries once they recover more. And maybe U.S. demand for foreign goods will wane as stimulus and savings are spent up. Others worry the U.S. economy isn't as competitive as it was in the past due to business regulations and generous social programs that keep people out of the workforce. And next, Kuaishou technology is the newest target in China's tech crackdown. So far, it has already cost the industry trillions. And one expert says we shouldn't count on those stocks recovering anytime soon. He told NTD's Evelyn Lee why that is.
Kuaishou Technology just fell to a record low. The post-listing lockup on sales of its shares just expired, and investors dumped their stocks. It shows their fear of the Chinese online crackdown. The stock is now down more than 20% from its listing price, and this is part of a much bigger trillion-dollar crackdown on tech companies in China. Experts say this shows that the regime has no problem sacrificing investor interests to achieve its public priorities. Anders Kors says that Xi Jinping isn't thinking about second and third order effects that could include a decoupling from the U.S. And now investors are skittish.
So they're looking for signals from state media sources, the smallest of investigations by the government. They're predicting that could wipe out billions of dollars.
China commentator Ren Yi says that companies and investors are behind the curve when it comes to anticipating regulations in China. So when state media criticized video platforms for their vulgar content, investors of the largest video and live streaming firms like Kuaishou reacted. Kors says that Xi is making an attempt to expand China's influence and impose certain principles on his own society at the same time. But as a communist regime, it isn't guided by the best economic thinking.
The larger Politburo beneath are providing him with economic analysis that is probably faulty because it is focused on trying to please him and trying to cater to his preconceptions and biases.
Kors thinks that big investors will be unwinding their investments. That's because the West is becoming increasingly aware of his more aggressive and predatory approach. And indeed, Cathie Wood's ARK Invest was rapidly shedding its Chinese stocks amid the crackdown.
Aggressive, even predatory approach of China is only increasing.
So he says it's not going to change anytime soon. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
Beijing's regulatory crackdown on Chinese firms is sending shockwaves through stock markets. American investors are worried about backing Chinese companies, But questions are raised. Why is Beijing doing this to Chinese-owned companies? NTD's Don Ma has more.
Beijing's regulatory crackdowns on major Chinese firms is causing companies to lose hundreds of billions of dollars in stock value. Investors are more wary than ever about investing in Chinese firms. The latest casualty from the crackdown is China's after-school tutoring industry. Beijing laid down a harsh regulation that banned private teaching firms from earning profits and raising capital. Companies were also not permitted to hire foreigners as teachers. The regulation resulted in investor sell-offs that erased more than $1 trillion in value from Chinese equities. Affected companies include major players like ByteDance. The firm had a stake in the education sector, and now it could be laying off hundreds of its employees. Many Chinese firms have been hit by Beijing's recent crackdowns, major companies such as Alibaba, Tencent, Didi, and others. So why is Beijing doing this to its own Chinese-owned companies? Commentators offer a number of explanations. One told Chinese-owned newspaper South China Morning Post it's because these companies are getting too big, and Beijing is nervous about the tech firm's power. For example, companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon have a huge influence on customer behavior and the economy. On rare occasions, even public policy. They have enormous amounts of data on users, infrastructure, and transportation. This is the case with some major Chinese tech companies as well, and this power may not be necessarily used in line with the regime's goals. Another told South China Morning Post that a reason could also be that Beijing is concerned about Chinese companies' data falling into the hands of foreign countries. This could have been the case with the crackdown on Chinese ride-hailing firm Didi when it tried to go public on the U.S. stock market. Didi has a huge archive of potentially sensitive data. It includes Chinese infrastructure and the real-time locations of large numbers of Chinese citizens. Beijing was likely worried that this data would go to U.S. regulators in the process of Didi going public. Don Ma, NTD News.
Coming up, health passes continue to create controversy in France. A former army intelligence officer said the situation might be very dangerous if the government doesn't step back on the measure. And the Belarusian sprinter who defected after competing at the Tokyo Olympics has safely arrived in Poland. She explains why she can't go back to her country. We'll have more on that in just a moment here on NTD News. In France, the government declares that the new health pass is constitutional. This despite growing numbers of demonstrators who have been protesting the health pass for almost a month. NTD correspondent David Vives met with an army officer who participated in the demonstrations. He shared his insights on why he believes the protests will continue to grow.
On Thursday, France's Constitutional Council gave its approval to the controversial health pass, and starting Monday, August 9th, showing the health pass will be mandatory in order to access restaurants, bars, trains, planes, and hospitals, among other public venues. In other words, the French will need to show either proof of vaccination or a negative COVID-19 test that is less than 48 hours old. This is happening despite growing numbers of protests throughout France over the past several weeks. Army Reserve officer and former intelligence officer Alexandre Joubin-Brunet participated in the protest. He says France is approaching a turning point in history.
We have come to a complete break between the people of France and their leadership, and this could be dangerous.
Joubin says the rift between the people and the government happened on July 12th, when President Emmanuel Macron extended health pass restrictions to cultural and leisure venues. And on July 26th, the Assembly extended health pass restrictions even further. Only 230 legislators were present, and the vote took place during the night, despite opposition from many French citizens.
When it comes to a law that will have such an impact on people, where were the members of the Assembly? Out of 925 members, not even 100 publicly spoke against it.
The health pass has been placing incremental restrictions on people's freedom. It will even be required to take the bus or subway. Joubin says this will create many divisions and tensions in society.
The president is here to protect the people and guarantee their safety. He has to maintain unity among the people. That's his duty. But in this case, government power is creating division.
But he says there is hope as the demonstrations show increasing momentum.
All the division that has been pushed on us has reached the limit. The French people understood this, and I think they are starting to awaken.
Calls for new protests on Saturday have already begun circulating on social media. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
The Belarusian sprinter who refused to go back to her country after competing at the Tokyo Olympics has safely arrived in Poland. She said she decided to defect because her family told her it wasn't safe to return. NTD's Eddie Econ has more on this.
Krystyna Siemnaskaya arrived in Poland on Wednesday after a brief stop in the Austrian capital Vienna. The 24-year-old sought diplomatic protection in Tokyo on Monday, refusing to board a flight back to her homeland. At a press conference in Warsaw on Thursday, she said the Belarusian Olympic team tried to force her to go home early after she criticized her coaches. But she decided to defect after her grandmother told her she could be put in a prison or mental hospital in Belarus.
When I pick up my clothes and go to the car, my grandmother, she called me and she said, you can't come back to home because on the TV they say a lot of bad words about you, that you have some mental problems and maybe you can go to some hospital in Belarus or maybe to jail, we don't know.
Poland has granted her a humanitarian visa. Her husband has also left Belarus and should soon reunite with her.
I feel myself much better that here. I feel that I'm in safety and a lot of people support me here. And my husband, he's already in a road by car to the Poland, so I will wait him today in the evening. He will be here, maybe with me. So.
The incident has focused renewed attention on the political situation in Belarus, a former Soviet state under authoritarian rule. Police there have cracked down on dissent, following a wave of protest triggered by an election last year. Eddie Econ, NTD News.
More than 10,000 people have reached England by crossing the Channel in small boats this year. And despite government attempts to reduce the illegal crossings, the numbers keep rising. NTD's Joanne Robson has the story.
The Home Office confirms over 480 people crossed the Dover Strait on 21 boats on Wednesday. This is a new record for a single day. More people arrived on Thursday. Dozens of migrants, including children, were intercepted and brought ashore by Border Force. The crossings have resumed in recent days, following a period of bad weather. More than 10,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats in 2021, despite the dangers involved. Two groups of migrants were seen at the lifeboat station on Wednesday afternoon. One group said they were from Iran and Afghanistan and had fled religious persecution. The second group included people from Vietnam and Eritrea. Home Secretary Priti Patel has repeatedly vowed to make the route unviable, but crossings have continued to rise. Last month, Patel announced an agreement to more than double the number of police patrolling French beaches, with the government to pay France £54 million. But it's not easy to prevent the crossings. Footage shot Wednesday at the break of dawn on a beach in northern France shows a dozen migrants quietly jumping onto an inflatable dinghy. A man helps them by pushing the dinghy in waist-deep water. French police say their ability to stop this is limited. There are too many migrants, the coast is too long, and the smugglers are too skilled.
Our objective is to stop any attempts to leave before they head out. Here today we're observing the entire coastline to detect any vessels ready to go to sea, and to engage ground patrols to intercept before they go to sea. For us, once they are at sea, it's basically too late. We can accompany them, escort them, but it becomes purely a rescue mission.
The Home Secretary was in Greece this week to discuss shared challenges on illegal migration. The Home Office says she met the Greek migration minister, visited a newly built migration reception centre, and learned how Greece prevents small boat crossings. At their closest point, England and France are just over 20 miles apart. Despite the obvious dangers, the trip is tempting for many. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
Coming up, Sao Paulo's tallest building now has a glass floor on the 42nd level. We'll show you the view when we come back from the break.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm coming to you with the most important commercial that I've ever done. All of you know what MyPillow and myself have gone through in the last 5 months in my efforts to bring the truth forward. Well, it's all come down to this. I'm having a cyber symposium on August 10th, 11th, and 12th. This historical event will be live streamed 72 hours straight on my new platform, frankspeech.com. You can help by getting everybody you know to go to frankspeech.com now. To help support this Cyber Symposium event, I am offering some of the best prices ever on my pillow products, but they're only offered at frankspeech.com. Go to frankspeech.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to receive these exclusive My Pillow offers. Thank you and God bless.
A collector of traditional archery equipment is showcasing his large collection of bows and arrows. Most of them come from ancient Asia and India. These weapons of antiquity reveal to us the rich culture and legendary stories behind them.
Sticks and feathers joined to create this beautiful ancient archery. They're part of a personal collection belonging to Jack Farrell, a professional carpenter in Houston, Texas. He explains making and shooting traditional bows and arrows is a lifelong hobby.
6 or 7 years old, I think my father saw me making little bows and arrows out of sticks and things, and so he bought me a wood bow. He bought himself a wood bow, and we shot them for a while, and then my bow broke, and then he lost interest, and so I started using his bow, and I've been shooting a bow ever since then. So,
divorced and childless, he sees his collection as children. The simplest among his pieces are known as self bows. Found in India in the 19th century, this steel bow has Arabic inscriptions inlaid with gold and silver, showing information about its maker. Composed bows are those made of wood, water buffalo horns, and tendon, like this asymmetric Japanese bow and the crab bow, collected in India by the British military. Jack says one of his most interesting items is a broken bow his friend brought from Mongolia. It was first made in Beijing during China's Cultural Revolution.
in the early 1960s, during the Cultural Revolution, the Red Guard went to the Juyan Ho bow shop, and even though his bows are loyal communist bows with red stars on them, that wasn't enough. They took all the produce of the shop, all the water buffalo horns, all the tendon, all the wood, all the old bows, all the old arrows, all the arrow making material. They took everything and made a pile of it out in the street and set fire to it.
Jack also owns arrowheads from different historical periods, but all of them came from one town in Afghanistan. He says archery has helped him understand the philosophy of Asia's nomadic culture.
Archery works on rules of engineering and aerodynamics, and you can understand a good deal of that, but not everything. You just never get to the point where you understand it all. So it's a bottomless thing. It's wonderful.
At one point, the Korean government even invited Farrell to visit and view their extensive bow collections.
One of the biggest cities in the world now boasts a bird's-eye view of its Brazilian concrete jungle. Sao Paulo's tallest building now features a glass floor on its 42nd level that is putting a fear of heights to the test. Called the Sampa Sky, this dizzying lookout will open to the public on Sunday, but a select few were treated to a special preview at the nearly 600 feet tall building. The Sampa Sky was inspired by Chicago's deck on the 103rd floor of the Willis Tower. And just because you stand 18 feet tall doesn't mean you don't need some support. Scientists now believe giraffes display intricate social behavior. Until now, the tallest land animal was thought to be rather aloof, forming no lasting bonds. New research published in the journal Mammal Review suggests female giraffes form long relationships with one another and even care for each other's young. Female giraffes also continue to live 30% of their lives past their fertile years. That's uncommon in the animal world and is largely seen as an indicator they stick around to ensure the survival of their grandchildren. Male giraffes, on the other hand, appear to be about as aloof as originally thought, only forming bonds with their mothers. Giraffes are listed as vulnerable by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Their numbers have declined by 40% since 1985. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a